Hello again, I'm Jay Owens and welcome to what's usually a live stream. I'm the author of this book, Customer Servitude, and every couple of weeks I get on Facebook and I talk about the themes in the book. It's actually been more than a couple of weeks because it's been hard to find a good time to go live among all the other things that I've been doing, and so I'm just going to cover a couple of topics in one go and get us caught up today, and just post the video rather than do this at a decent hour because this is not really a decent live video hour. I talked a bit last time about how numbers of applicants drive wages, and some eagle-eared viewers caught that and put two and two together and wondered why, if companies' wages depended on the number of applicants, why they were reducing their applicant pool by using drug tests and background checks. And good question, I'm glad you asked. So while there are a lot of customer service jobs that hire without doing pre-employment screenings, like drug tests and background checks and even personality tests, and sometimes even math tests, because those count as well, the number of employers who do use these tools is growing. Now keep in mind that employers themselves didn't create these things. Other companies sell drug testing and personality testing and background checks and services like that, and their potential customer base is the companies that then go on to hire people. And they market these tools to these companies in exactly the same way that products are marketed to consumers like us, the general public. Because they know that things like internal shrink, and that's means employees stealing from the company, and things like high turnover are problems that companies want to solve. And if you're not familiar with kind of the inner workings of the retail world, it might surprise you to know that companies lose more in theft to people inside the company than they do to shoplifters, by a lot. Interestingly enough, a little aside here, the problem is worse, way worse in the United States than it is elsewhere in the world. Here, where we do drug checks, drug tests and background checks, and examine the crap out of everybody to try to figure out if people are good people or bad people, and then refuse to pay wages that are good enough to live on, and then make it hard to get health care and all time off and all of that stuff. Here, where we do all of that and then make it hard to work, there's lots of theft. So maybe, I don't know, it's not drugs and criminal histories and personality issues that are the problems. But anyway, these providers sell their services to companies as a way to reduce loss and turnover and to protect the business's assets. And it sounds really reasonable, like on the surface, right? That if you hire criminals, they're more likely to do criminal stuff at work. If you hire people who are on drugs, then they're also criminals by default, and then they're likely to do criminal stuff at work and probably also be under the influence all the time or whatever. And hey, why stop there? If you want friendly and obedient people, maybe you could give them a little test and ask them questions that are designed to test how you feel about authority or your attitude towards making decisions on your own. Weed out all the people who might not, toe the line. Get yourself a nice little group of perfect, law-abiding, totally sober employees, and you won't have problems, right? Only the problems don't actually go away. As I said, despite all of the stuff that we do to try to screen applicants for jobs, turnover in retail and hospitality is crazy high. Internal theft counts for something like half of business losses, if I remember correctly, and like all the screenings and security cameras and clear plastic purses and team building pizza parties in the world don't seem to make a difference in the rates of those things. So they don't stop problems, but you know what they do? They disproportionately screen out minorities. In the case of background checks, the cause and effect here should be kind of obvious. Police are statistically more likely to stop, to question, to arrest, and then charge Black and brown people for the same infractions that white people commit at the exact same rate. they're more likely to get convicted and to get harsher sentences when they are convicted. So this is all statistically proven. So if you take all of that data from one racist system and you plug it into the employment system, what do you get? A racist employment system. And then there's the personality tests. So I know we've all taken them. I actually failed the one at Target back in the day, apparently. And I always wondered what answers I had answered wrong that had caused me to fail. And then I became a manager in a different company, and I realized I kind of learned how these tests work. So first of all, there's no standard these are good employees scores for companies to go on. So you buy this test, but it doesn't come with sort of a calibration for what good answers are. And because every company looks for different things in employees. So what they do is they have current employees take the screening, and then they have managers and supervisors evaluate those current employees. So you take all of that data and you create a profile of the kind of employee who seems to do well in that company's system. So that becomes the profile against which every other applicant gets compared. But all the test really says is that the applicants who score well are most similar to the employees that you already have and you already like, which again sounds like totally reasonable on the surface, but that completely kills diversity, right? And that means that that any bias that exists in management staff, in the customer base, whatever, any bias which results in some employees not fitting in or not being treated well or being forced to leave or choosing to leave, that bias gets coded into the test, because those are the ones that are going to be evaluated as not working well within the company, so people like them don't get hired. So back to the original question, why reduce the applicant pool if all of those things end up driving up wages? Well, the root of that answer is that nobody's really thinking about it that way. Companies have problems that they want to solve, like turnover and theft. And the people who make the decisions, who are largely white and male, think, hey, if we don't hire criminals and we just get more of these kind of people that we already trust, then that will improve things, and hey, I'll get a good review and maybe a raise. Companies know that when unemployment goes down and it becomes harder to find applicants, wages have to go up. Either that or standards have to be loosened. I worked for a company who did credit checks on applicants for a really long time. And then the recession happened. And pretty soon there weren't enough applicants to pass the credit check and be hired. Like, it weeded out so many people that they finally had to stop doing it. Anyway, so when the people who make these decisions look at the benefits of these tools, they're not thinking big picture. They're more likely to be white and male and affluent, and therefore more likely to believe that the legal system is fair, that arrest records are a good measure of a person's character, and that hiring procedures are unbiased, and that anything that resembles a standardized test is probably really scientific. So of course none of those things are actually true, but that's the entire mechanism of our racist society in a snapshot, right? Affluent white males look at the world and go, I don't really see a problem. And eventually, like the thing with the credit checks, when the applicant pool gets too restricted, yeah, they'll have to adjust. But as long as we keep more people in poverty, more people unable to afford higher education, and there's not going to be a shortage of applicants, really, not enough to actually prevent these tools from being useful, because perpetuating poverty is kind of the other key to the perpetuating racism. It's easy to drive that divide. Anyway, but that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. So I said I was going to cover 2 in one day, just to kind of get us all caught up. So my other topic that I thought I'd talk a little more about was something that I touched on in an earlier video. As I mentioned, I'm gay. And I've been through the whole process and spectrum of coming out and being out while working in customer service jobs. And if you've never really considered it before, let me assure you that that absolutely impacts your work environment either way, whether you're out or you're not out. It does affect your work environment, and worse when you're in the closet. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I mentioned that while I was in the closet at work, and that sounds weird, when I wasn't out at work, while I was afraid of what might happen when customers found out I was gay, during that whole time, I would refer to my wife as my roommate or use male pronouns for her, because I knew that the customer that I was talking to assumed that I was married to a man every time. So this is something anyone who's ever sort of been hidden about anything about their identity has had to go through. Because until you've been in a situation where something as just mundane as talking about your spouse or your family or what you did on your vacation or, plans for, the cat's got to be in the video too, plans for the weekend or whatever, until you've been in a situation where that becomes a situation where you have to lie for some reason, it's hard to imagine how much effort and how much concentration and presence of mind it takes to function that way. So this is something I've had a lot of trouble explaining to homophobic people who don't understand why we can't just stay quiet about it. So like, how many times do you think an average person mentions their spouse or significant other in any given day? Like, or things which imply the existence of a spouse or significant other, like, I don't know, talking about your kids or any of the normal activities which you do every day, which involve interacting with a spouse if you have one. These come up in conversation an awful lot because, relationships are important parts of people's lives. Or, hey, conversely, if you've ever been, unhappily single, you've probably noticed how often people talk about their relationships just in conversation. Things that have nothing to do with relationships. It's a lot. So not doing that takes a lot of effort. You kind of have to create this fictional existence in your mind where your partner becomes several other people, and you have to keep track of who you've described them to be, and you have to consistently think a few sentences ahead so you don't start a story or a topic where that involves your partner so much that you can't word your way out of it. You have to have this elaborate cover story for your life in your mind all the time. It's kind of like being a spy. And it's just one thing when it's one thing when it's just you, going about your life, talking to strangers. You really don't have anything else to do with your life. Like if you're a lesbian and you're at the grocery store, and you're buying, wine and chocolate and flowers, and it's early February, and the cashier makes a joke about how the dude is supposed to buy stuff, flowers and things for the girl and not the other way around. Your choice of how to deal with that can always involve not returning to that store or not dealing with that cashier, right? You can choose to correct them. Maybe they react with disgust, or maybe they apologize, whatever, or you can choose to just play along and joke around about it and joke that you're buying them for yourself because your man's too stereotypically dude, like to get it right, whatever. And y'all have a good laugh, you move on, and then you can decide not to come back and interact with that person anymore. But what if you're the cashier and the customer makes a joke or a comment or whatever that, if you were to actually respond honestly, would out you? So if you choose to be honest and the customer chooses to be offended, that customer can use their power as a customer to negatively impact your employment situation. And unless you work for a company who, or a boss who are unusually willing to stand up to customers, there's real tangible risk in outing yourself in a conversation. You can't avoid that customer in the future if they don't choose to avoid you, as long as you have that job. So you don't have that choice as an employee. You don't have the same choice as a customer would, or anybody outside that situation. And this comes up 1,000 times a day, and not just for LGBTQ people, but any element of identity which is invisible. So we consider sort of small talk to be part of an element of friendliness in American culture, and friendliness isn't just a cultural expectation when you're in customer service. It's a job duty. So, but so is keeping customers happy, and an offended customer isn't a happy customer. So the expectation is that you give customers the answer that they want to hear, even if that answer isn't true. Even if doing so is taxing and difficult and demeaning to you. So, or from another angle, imagine you've had some sort of injury or condition which impacts things like, I don't know, your ability to have children. Imagine how often random people ask strangers whether they have kids or whether they plan to have kids. And spoiler, it's a lot. And how much effort it would take, if you've not been in a similar situation, how much effort it would take to keep a smile on your face. And not just for that guy. Imagine if your paycheck depended on your ability to do this. Because even if that person realizes that they made you upset and that they shouldn't have asked the personal question, and honestly, they're as likely to get upset that you got upset as anything else. Even if they apologized and they understand what they did, the next customer and the next customer and the next customer won't have any idea why you're not chipper and cheerful and might look a little teary-eyed. Any of them might take issue with it and complain. And all of that effort that it takes to control what you say and control your emotions and control the reactions, your reactions to control the reactions of others, all of that is called emotional labor. Customer service jobs in general take a lot of emotional labor, and in fact, it's kind of the defining element of those jobs. But what's noteworthy and why I bring it up is that I wanted to expand a little on what I was saying in my video about how customer service culture is part of what keeps racism alive and kicking. That's all the isms and the phobias and stuff. It's this stuff. It's this feedback loop. Because whatever the majority of customers, whatever the bulk of the culture expects or wants from a group of people, gets coded into the behavior expectations in customer service. So if the culture wants gay people to be hidden, done. We tell employees, or just create an overwhelming amount of coercive pressure to not upset customers by outing themselves. It gets coded into that expectation because the customer's always right? And if the customer is probably homophobic, then that's just what everybody's going to go with. So the customers expect it, and because they expect it, the employers and the employees kind of are then obligated to deliver on that expectation. That's the way we've set this up. And then the more you deliver on it, the more you kind of reinforce the legitimacy of their expectation, the more then you're expected to deliver it. So that's how cultural bias shapes behavior expectations, and then that does behavior expectations reinforce cultural bias, and around and around and around, and that's the gist of how customer service jobs become that machine that perpetuates racism and sexism and homophobia and all that. So I think I've kind of rambled on long enough, and we will get back to live videos hopefully next week. Trying to find a better schedule to set aside to do this. Again, if you have anything to say, any comments, any questions, you want to argue with me, go ahead and post them in the comments or drop me a line on the customer service page, customer servitude page. And be sure to follow us on YouTube and Twitter. And I will see you next week with another live video.